just getting started as a coach, it was pretty common to have 100,000 meters in a week for a distance program. And so, we were looking at 15 to 20,000 yards in a day. That has changed quite a bit over the course of the last 15 years or so, to where it is a little bit more centered around making sure that you're holding pace. And so that's what I'm going to spend a lot of time talking about today. Really today really um, is the quality of work that we're doing to make sure that we've got swimmers that are able to hold fast times, but hold it for a long period of time. And so, when I'm working with athletes on the distance side of things, really focus on two things. One is the basically the production side of things, or the capacity, where we are trying to get kids to have that aerobic base to be able to swim for long periods of time and to be able to maintain paces for a long period of time. But when I look at training distance swimmers, I'm looking at the capacity that they have, and that is their VO2 max, the amount of oxygen their heart can pump, their cardiovascular system, all of those sorts of things. We want to basically make sure that they built that up, and that really starts at a fairly young age. Our age group program, we're encouraging them to build up, and we're encouraging our coaches to try to build that capacity. And so, what we're doing when we're doing that is, it doesn't have to be a lot of heavy yards, but it just needs to be consistent. And so, what we're really trying to do is to get those yards to be um, at a decent pace. And so, rather, like I said, back in the olden days, 20 years ago, it was, we're going to go 10 300s, and we're just going to swim. I've found over the years that, again, it's hard to get kids to commit to that, especially in this day and age. So, what we've tried to do is mix that up a little bit, keep them moving, but add little points of emphasis. And so, when we're building capacity, I've really two main types of sets that we will do. One is where I will typically spike their yard, or their heart rate and their effort at the beginning of a set, and then allow them to kind of ride that high heart rate out over, like, what I would say, kind of a longer, easier part of the set. So what I mean by that is, a typical set that we would do would be four 100s at maybe 120 or 130 uh, at a good effort. And so we may be looking at holding their mile pace or their 800 pace. Uh, and then we would do a 300 smooth with some sort of technique in there that we're trying to get to. So we may do a three 100s fast at 800 pace, and then a 300, four kicks off of every wall, and on, let's just say 4 minutes, where they get a decent amount of rest, and we may go 3 or 4 rounds of that. So we're really getting something similar to what if you just said, hey, we're going 8 300s. However, you're able to control the pace a little bit more. You're able to get more effort out of it. So when we're talking about building capacity, that's one of the main sets that we will do, and we'll do variations of that. We may do 450s at 200 pace, and then four 200s, with taking 15 strokes per length, short course yards or short course meters, and we may do 3 or 4 rounds of that. So So we'll typically, that is kind of our, what I would call our capacity building. And we typically will do that maybe 3 days a week. The other side of it, with when we're talking about capacity, is then also is the long distance swimming. And so when I say that we don't typically do a lot of long stuff, when when I would say kind of my distance program was at its height, um, we very rarely did anything over 400 meters in a practice. And so it was never just set up as, hey, we're going 800s or thousands or 1500s or anything like that. It was mainly just again, the sets that I mentioned, the 50s and 200s, 50s and 400s, those sorts of things. However, I think over time, I think that especially because we don't do a lot of heavy distance training and a lot of that, I think there's a mental component that's missed on that. And so what I've tried to add over the course of the last few years was just one day, and really just part of a day where we did just a single 800 or a single 1500. I was talking to one of my colleagues here in Illinois, and they do just a 30-minute swim where it's just continuous for 30 minutes. And I think that was something that we were missing, and something that I've added in our into our program, um, so that there's a mental aspect to it. Just to, can they maintain their focus? Can they maintain their energy for 1,500 meters? We typically will add some sort of uh, caveat to that, like, again, going back to, they need to take 5 kicks off of each wall for the entire 30 minutes, or they need to every fourth 50, they need to pick up their pace a little bit. Those sorts of things, something to keep them engaged. But I think that that's something that, when we get caught up in the training side of things, we really miss out on the mental aspects of being in a race for 5,000 meters in an open water swim, or being, stuck in, that mental mindset for 20 minutes straight. And I think sometimes we miss out on that. Um, so again, I think that that's an important part of any kind of distance program, is making sure you're preparing the kids mentally for what they're going to do. So that's all built in that capacity, where we're really trying to get the upper parts of their program, or upper parts of their endurance, trained and ready to go. The next part is what I would call power or race pace, or specific training that we'll do, and we do a decent amount of that. I think that what's been popular in the shorter events with the US RPT. I think I've learned from that, just on the distance side of things, to be able to incorporate the race pace, the preciseness of USRPT and the sprint and the shorter events, into a distance program. In that, we really spend a lot of time training at the specific pace that they want to hold. So if I have a swimmer who wants to break 4 minutes in the 400 meters, we're trying to set up as many opportunities as we can where they're holding under a minute per 100. And so that may be, at the start, that may be just doing 50s, where we're trying to hold a minute. But, and may work up to hundreds, and maybe, I very, very rarely can we do anything 200 wise, but we try to expand that out as we go. And with that, I think it is important to have them hold the time that they have, and create the situation. So again, back to my example of a 4-minute 400 meter, we may only be able to do hundreds on a minute 40, and they have to hold under a minute, and they're getting 40 seconds rest. I think that that's an important part of it. And then over time, as they build their capacity over the season, as they're able to get a little bit faster, we were able to cut that rest down. And so, hundreds on holding under a minute on 140 may become holding hundreds on a minute on 130, and maybe holding 100s under a minute on 110. So, all of those things are possible. And so we spend a decent amount of time doing that each week as well. So, and I'll talk a little bit about my weekly cycle as we get a little bit further in. But we'll typically do that. And one of the things that we focus on then when we're doing race pace is being able to do race pace at the end. And so that's where we'll typically really um, we'll really kind of follow up if we're doing 10-100 or 10-50s holding under 30 seconds. That's where we will really follow up with making sure that 8, 9, and 10 are really great efforts. And that's the important part, I think, when we're talking about the power phase or the race pace phase, is making sure not only are they holding time, but they're learning things to do at the end of the races to make sure they're holding time. And so I think that's something that is often missed when we get into a distance program where we really say, okay, we just need to grind it out and we need to go as fast as we can all of the time. I think it really is more of a chance um, to be able to um, maintain their pace over time and maintain their pace over the course of a race. So I think that's something that we really spend a lot of time on. Um, so with that, one of the tricks that I've learned, and I will use Jan Olbricht, who is I've seen him speak many times, and if you have a chance to get his read any of his articles, I would suggest doing it. But one of the things that I found is a good trick is when you're building capacity, you're talking about being fast on the front end, and you're talking about getting your heart rate up in the front end, and then extending that out and extending what I would call heart rate. And again, people have different feelings about using heart rate, whether or not it is um, whether it's an accurate version of effort and all of those sorts of things. But it is something that kind of gives you an idea of where you are today. So what I try to do is elevate the heart rate, really put the kids under stress on the front end of a cycle, and then allow them to extend it out over time. And that's where I'm on the capacity side of things. And then when I'm on the power side of things and on the race pace side of things, we're really talking about going fast at the end. And so I'm not a big I'm not a big believer in descend sets because I think there's too many variables. You get a descend set where someone will go, 120, 119, 118, 117, and then 105. And I don't think we really get a lot out of that. So if I'm talking about a power set or something where I'm really trying to max out their abilities, we're really trying to go fast at the end. And so that may be, we'll flip the set over from what we did on the capacity side of things and say we're going 3 100s on 110, and then we're going 300 all out, or we're going 2 300s negative split, and then 3 100s at race pace at the end. And so when we're really talking about VO2 max, or we're talking about maxing out power wise, um, we're really talking about going fast at the end. So, um, so when I plan out my weeks, I typically go on a 3 week cycle. And so when we're talking about training over the course of time, I will kind of set up everything in 3 weeks, sometimes 4 weeks, depending on how meets shake out. And sometimes, your meets never line up exactly the way your 3 week cycle would go. But I typically, at the beginning of the year, will do a lot of those first 3 weeks. I really call stroke school. The first 3 weeks of the season, we basically just do a lot of drills. We talk a little bit. We build up our yardage over those 3 weeks, but at the same time, a lot of it is just getting on the same page verbally. That they know what I mean when I say, lift your elbow up, or they know what I mean when I say your hips are too low, or rotation, and those sorts of things. And so when we're talking about, a program in general, once we get into the meat of the season, I don't have to re-explain everything that I want to see out of a stroke. I want to spend those first 3 weeks really establishing the things that are important: high hips, good hip rotation, head position, all of those sorts of things that need to be taken care of, so that later on in the season I can say maybe one or two words and get them to understand what I'm saying in a set of, again, going back to the 100. We're going 10 100s on 130. I don't want to interrupt that set to make some changes. I want to be able to just say it in those 20 seconds that I have to make those things. So in my season plan, we've got those first 3 weeks, and we call it stroke school because I want them to know that this is technique based, and we're really trying to get started, get the season started on a good foot with common language and common expectations. And um, so we will do that typically. Then we'll start on our 3 and 4 week cycles, and the first week of my 3 week cycle is heavily capacity based. And so, we will do a lot of those sets where we are going 3 100s fast, 3 300s, with good technique and good stroke counts. We'll do those sorts of sets as we go through, and we'll probably get 3 or 4 of those in a week. Um, and then we'll fill that week up with then a lot of work in other strokes, and then we will also do 2 sprint sets, and then one VO2 max set. And so those are kind of the sets that we're typically working on in that first week. So it's really geared towards really building up that capacity. The second week in that 3 week cycle is more power based, and so that increases over the course of the year. But we will go 3, for lack of a better term, VO2 max sets during that week, and one of them is typically stroke, and so it's not all freestyle. Um, so we will do basically 3 of those sets. We'll have 1 or 2 capacity sets in there, and then we'll fill the rest in with some sprint work and some recovery time. And so that's our second week, and then our third week, we do allow them to recover, not the whole week. So we will typically do Monday, Tuesday will be um, fairly difficult. Usually a main set that is a VO2 max or a power set, and then a set that is more capacity based. And then basically Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, we still get a decent amount of volume. That's where I would probably throw in one of our 30-minute swims, or a 2,000 swim, just mentally to prepare them. And so our yardage would still be, roughly, 6,000, 7,000, probably 7,000 if it's a single practice, 10 to 12,000 if it's a double. But it's all fairly low intensity. So we're still maintaining that high volume, but we've really kind of sucked some of the intensity out to allow the kids to recover, because at the end of the day, um, the real fatiguing part of a program is the high quality things that you do. It's not necessarily the warm up, warm downs, those sorts of things. And so even though the yardage it maintains a little bit higher, the lack of um, of intensity really allows the kids to recover. And so that gives us, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday to recover. Uh, I typically do it around a meet time, so that they can, and that Saturday, Sunday is not a recovery because they're competing. And obviously that's the height of intensity. But I found that it gives them a light at the end of the tunnel. They're able to swim fairly well. I mean, they're probably not going to be lifetime bests or anything else, but they're not swimming in that kind of beat down state. They're actually able to step up and perform, feel good about themselves, feel good about the things that they did, the training that they've done, and so it really turns into being a motivating factor. Those are the 3 weeks, and we will repeat that throughout the season. With again, let's just say a VO2 max set is, um, again, I don't know, 2,000 yards total. Um, by the end of the season, it may be 3,500 yards or meters, depending on the season. So those 3 week cycles, or that cycle kind of remains as we go through. It also, I typically will do that 3 week cycle as we're starting to rest as well. It's just the yardage of those main cycles, start to decrease with the recovery on the back end on that 3rd week. So it, for me at least, it has worked out to be a good system to kind of keep me on track as a coach, to make sure that we are, you getting the work in that we need every time. Um, so that's how we kind of uh, do the season throughout. On a weekly basis, we will typically we start out on Monday morning. That's typically what I would call kind of the warm up to the week. We do a lot of IM. It's a lot of just general swimming. For the most part, when we don't have a meet, we have Sundays off, so it gets them kind of back into the swing of things, and physically kind of gets them warmed up and gets them back into what we're doing. The Monday night, that's when we will typically do a lot of our faster stuff. And so even though we're talking distance training, I think there's an important component to any athlete to be able to train everything. We're talking about developmental athletes, and so I find Monday evening, they've warmed up in the morning. It's really our chance to go fasting. So we'll go a lot of 25s off the blocks. We'll go, again, 12 25s all out on 50 seconds. We may go, 250s all out on 2 minutes, 225s all out on a minute, with the 500 easy in between. And we may do that 2 or 3 times. Um, so when we'll do that on Monday night, I think it's important. Excuse me. I think it's important for the kids to be able to. I apologize for that. I think it's important for the kids that are developing to be able to develop that speed as well. So um, just because we're talking about distance doesn't mean there's no place for some sprint work and some speed work. And I think that history has shown that a lot of kids that are coming out of distance programs develop into great sprinters over time. Again, I'll show my age a little bit, but Alexander Popov, one of the greatest sprinters of all time, what had was his first world ranking was in the 1500. And so I think you can come to a lot of um, a lot of athletes over time that have developed into sprinters. So I want to make sure, even though we're talking a distance program, that we don't lose sight of that. So we'll do a lot of sprinting stuff on Monday. On Tuesday morning, I run 3 mornings a week. On Tuesday morning, we will typically do a lot of kicking and a lot of IM, and I'll talk a little bit about kicking here in a little bit as well. But we try to mix it up a little bit. We'll get our heart rate up to a certain point, but I really try to dedicate about 30 minutes to a good strong kick set, um, to to make sure we're activating that part of our stroke and that sort of thing. Um, Tuesday night, we will come back, and that will be typically one of our higher intensity days. And so if we're on a week where we're doing capacity, we'll be doing a major capacity set. If we're in a cycle where we're doing VO2 or power work, that'll be a major kind of race pace. A series of 650s, and I tend to allow them to do their stroke. So we may go 650s at 200 pace, 200 easy. We may do that 4 or 5 times. We a distance swimmer we may go 6 100s, same sort of way, at 500 pace, and work through that. Wednesday, we will typically, we don't go in the morning. We'll come back on Wednesday night, and we will do a fair amount of technique work. That's when I would typically kind of again throw in that one day of, hey, we're going to 1500 or we're going to 2000, that sort of thing. Um, so we will do that. On Thursday morning, we will come back. This Thursday morning would be where we would add a little bit more sprinting again. We would, again, typically go 25s and 50s, all out with a lot of rest, a little bit of IM work. We would use some cords, some resistance bands, and work on that on a Thursday morning as well to add a little bit of a strength component to it. Um, we would come back on Thursday night. That would typically then also be a little bit higher intensity session. If we had done VO2 on Tuesday, we would do a capacity on Thursday, or vice versa, depending on where we're at. We typically don't go on Friday morning. Friday evening is typically a lot of times I try to dedicate that to IM, and not necessarily a high intensity, but probably getting to threshold pace. Um, but where we would typically do, again, broken IMs, we may go 850s fly, 4 100s back, 3 150s breast, and then 4 100s free, something like that. Maybe a couple rounds of that. Something where we're not necessarily going 6 400 IMs or 8 200 IMs or anything like that, but we're really kind of breaking up the strokes and maybe doing an individual set with each stroke. So we have, we will typically do that on Friday. And then Saturday, what I typically tell people is, it's basically the hardest thing I can think of. And so, again, going back to my 3 week cycle, if we're on a capacity week, then, it's going to be capacity work. If it's a VO2 week, then it's probably going to be VO2. So, again, when depending on the week, but I try to fit in as much as I can on those days, knowing that they're going to have the rest of Saturday. We typically go Saturday morning and Sunday off. So we will really try to get after it on that day. On a meet weekend, it's a meet weekend, so it's its own set of intensity when we're doing that. So that's how the week's set up. One of the things that I when I talk about our distance program, one of the things that I think gets lost in a lot of distance programs, and I think that I think that it's coming around, and so I just want to emphasize it here, is that we spend a lot of time talking about our kick, and I think too often in the past it was acceptable just to have a 2 beat crossover kick. It doesn't really matter. I'm swimming distance. My legs aren't that important. I think what we found over time is how important your legs are and how important using your kick is. And I think it's not only important from a propulsive standpoint, when we're talking about using our legs, we're talking about using them not only to help us get from one end of the pool to the other, but also to help us pace. And so I think the legs are a great way for athletes in distance events to kind of gauge their effort and gauge their pacing as they go through. And so, um, so I'm going to talk first about just kind of conditioning the legs and being able to do those sorts of things. I, Kicking is a very important part, and I think that I've seen coaches, elite level coaches from around the country and around the world, really utilize the kick. And one of the things that I've seen for the most part is most uh, elite programs are running between 20 to 30% of their yardage is kick. And so it can take a number of forms, but when you're looking at your program, you're looking at how much kick you're doing. I try to be, and again, I think by that standard, I'm a little bit on the lower side. I definitely try to be 20 to 25%. But I've definitely seen coaches on the national and international stage that are closer to 30%. But that is included in a distance program and included in especially a developing distance program for younger athletes. And so we do a lot of kick, and again, I will quote Dave Salo, who I saw speak many times, but many years ago. He basically he broke it down pretty simply. He goes, "There's really only two types of kick. There's fast kick with a lot of rest, and there's fast kick with no rest." And so there really is not a lot of room for just, hey, go do a 400 kick and counting that as a kick set. Or, hey, we're just going 1050s kick on a minute, and I'll see you in 10 minutes. Most of the kick programs are programs that have, a kick component to it. It is fast kick. It is mostly freestyle kick, and I think there's some physiological reasons behind that. Um, I think one, if you're allowing your kids to just kick whatever they want, a lot of them are going to go to breaststroke because the tempo is so slow. They're able to keep up, but they don't need to have that kicking. And I think there is a physiological change that happens with just the speed of the feet when it comes to kicking freestyle. That I think it makes changes all the way down to the cellular level. So I think it's important that it's that this is not kicking, this is kicking. And so we're really talking about a little bit higher intensity when we're talking about a kick program. And so um, we do have some shorter stuff, but most are more casual kicking as part of warm up, or maybe it's a build set or a descend set or things like that. So I wouldn't say we're all fast all the time, but we are asking the kids to do a substantial amount of kick, and that kick is typically fast. So and again, you can kind of gauge your own program on what that 20 to 30% threshold is. But we also do it in a number of positions. I would say we use a board maybe less than half the time when we're kicking. It is on your side, on your back. Maybe a little bit of mix of everything, and I think that's an important part of it is making sure they're in different positions. And again, it is fast and there's some intensity to it. Um, One of the things that I like doing as well is adding into that kick set, adding a swimming portion where they're using their legs. And I think a lot of times when we're talking about um, kicking, it's just, okay, we're going to kick with the board and then we're going to move on to swimming. I like to add something in. So we may do again 850s freestyle kick fast. Um, and again, I would typically number 3 and number 6 are moderate. Just again, my own preference. Maybe I'm too soft, um, but we're going to go 850s fast freestyle kick, and then we're going to go 2 100s freestyle swim with an over kick or a 6 beat kick, or however you want to phrase that. But we're going to, we're going to do that, and we may do that 3 times, 4 times. But I think it's important to be able to make sure that, yes, they can kick, but can they kick while they swim? Can they incorporate that kick when it counts and when it matters? And so I think that's an important part in a distance swim. or a distance set, we may add something to that to allow them to have control over it. So it may be that 850s fast kick. We may go 3 100s swim with a variable kick rate. So it may be the first 100 is a moderate 3 beat or 4 beat kick. The second one is a 6 beat kick, and the third one is really just just an exaggerated over kick as they go through on the swimming side of things. Because again, I'll talk about this in a second. We're asking our distance swimmers to control their kick. So it's way different than a 50 freestyle where you dive in and you kick as hard as you can for the entire 50, or 100, where there may be a little bit of play in the kick, but it's mostly just pretty heavy kicking. What we're asking our distance swimmers to really have a good strategic edge to their kick to be able to control that. Um, so a lot of times I will add a swimming portion into that to allow them to incorporate their kick. And what I found too, and this is just kind of a bonus, when we're doing kick on a tight cycle and we have a swimmer who may not be able to maintain that cycle, say for all 850s, I don't necessarily have to give them a separate cycle or say, I just tell them that they need to catch up on the swimming portion. And so, they're a little bit behind on the kick. That swim portion, typically they're in that group because they can swim and they can maintain. And so they'll use that swimming portion to catch up. And so when you've got crowded lanes and that sort of thing, sometimes it's difficult to have a completely separate person or a completely separate lane for one person or two people. So that type of set allows that kind of automatic catch up as we go through. But when it comes to racing, again, when we talk about using the legs, I think a lot of my swimmers, we've used their kick to help control them on the front end of a race. And so so as they're going out, especially a young swimmer, they're excited for the race. You've got just the adrenaline from, okay, this is my chance. I'm going to swim a 500. I'm going to swim an 800 or 1500, and they go out too fast, or they go out what I would call out of kind of their aerobic range. And a lot of times the kick is what initiates that. And so if we can get them to control their kick on the front end of a race, that's really going to help them, maintain or stay in that proper physiological range in the front end of a race. And so that doesn't mean kicking easy or not having a kick. It just means being aware enough of your kick to help you establish the pace that you want to be at. And so that's an important part of, again, knowing your kick and being able to use your kick in practice, because we are going to ask you to use it in a meet. And then we talk about using our kick to change our pace. And so over the years, I've really tried to manage a number of strategies for different athletes and try to do things that work for them. So like with a 1500, we will typically coach the kids. I won't say typically. Depending on the athlete, we spend a lot of time working on kind of what works best for them, both physically and mentally. But we may ask them every 300 meters, we want you to pick up your pace. And some of that is to keep them from kind of lulling into just getting lazy during a race, because obviously it's 20 minutes of effort. So it's hard to keep your focus the entire time. But we will typically do 20 minutes, or I'm sorry, we'll typically go 300 meters at a certain pace. Then we'll ask them to bump their pace, and typically we'll ask them to bump that pace through their kick, and we'll add it, bump your kick up a little bit. Their arms will typically go with it, and they will be able to pick up their pace a little bit. And again, we've done things where we've had the kids, try to add some effort every 100, and sometimes, mentally that's hard for kids to kind of maintain over 1500, but we've had some success doing that. We've had kids descend 500s during a 1500. And again, when I talk about descending 500s in a 1500, I'm not really looking at the time, because I think you leave too much on the table there. we're really talking about the effort and really trying to re-engage them every 500 meters to do that. And again, we use the kick quite a bit to be able to do that. So that's really what what we'll do kick wise, and then probably the last thing that I wanted to talk about is really selling a distance program, and I think that there's so much out there that swimmers are, I need to be able to do, everything. And so, I may not be able to be at as many practices or, those sorts of things. Oh, or, a distance swimmer is always jealous of the 50 freestyler. And, why do they get to do the 50 and I have to do the mile? And those sorts of things I think are out there that as coaches we need to address. And so I think there's always the things that I want to make sure that when we're talking about distance swimmers and distance people is one. I think that there's a long-term benefit. I talked early on about that that a lot of world-class sprinters started out as distance people. I think that it is true that you can go from swimming distance events and distance practices and do anything in the sport. You can't necessarily do that from the sprint side of things. So you can't be, doing, I don't know, 1050s on 3 minutes, 3 days a week. And I know that's an oversimplification, but then be versatile enough to do other things. And I think that this allows our kids to do anything they want later on in their swimming careers. But also, I think in the moment we need to explain why we're doing what we're doing, and I think that it's in a lot of ways it's not fair to just say, "Hey, we're doing this set. It's 3,000 yards. Do it, and just do it to get better." I think we need to do a better job of selling kind of the benefits that this is going to have on your races and on your training. And that there is a reason why you're doing it. Because again, I think that our kids, again, if I'm swimming a distance practice, my face is in the water by myself with my own thoughts for, 30 to 40 minutes. And so, we need to kind of make sure that they understand that there is a reason behind it. And so, when we're talking about selling a program, and we're talking about selling, and really this goes with any parts of your program, you're really selling it why it's beneficial to them, what's in it for them, to be able to swim and do more yardage than maybe what some of their peers or what some of their teammates are doing. That they're, I hate to say it, there's a nobility in it. That working hard is its own reward. And I know that's kind of cliche, but I think it's an important part of that to be able to, to be able to work through that. So, so that's really what I have in a nutshell. I was going to open it up to any kind of questions that anybody had, or anything that, specifics. I know I talked a lot in general terms here, but if are there any specific questions that people have that may want to throw in the chat or just jump on and ask?
Okay, anybody who wants to have a question? Coach, I have a question. Okay.
Sure.
Commonly, the notion, or it's been a long time that they tend to not to use too much of the kick when they're using when they're doing a
Hmm.
distance swim like 1005. Okay.
Hmm.
What is your comment about that?
I think that I think that was something that was done in the past. I think that if you look at the elite level distance swimmers, and again, and I'm not going to say that they're motoring with a 6-beat kick, but I will say a lot of the distance swimmers here in the U.S., the elite ones, are able to kick. And one of the examples, I had a swimmer who swam at University of Southern California, and one of her teammates was Larson Jensen, and she just sent me a text just letting me know, kind of what she saw him do. But he did 10 100s kick, and he's one of our elite distance swimmers from a few years ago. did 10 100s kick with a board on a minute 15, long course meters. And so, he was able to kick. I watched trying to think who it was, Chip Peterson swim a 5K and basically had a 4 to 6 beat kick the entire 5 kilometers. So I think that we're seeing a lot more of it, and I think you're especially seeing it in the 400-meter races where the kick is a lot more incorporated into it, to where a lot of our elite 400-meter freestylers are kicking like it's a sprint event. And so I think that there needs to be a kick there. Even if you look at Katie Ledecky, I think that she's kicking, but she's using her kick a lot of times to initiate her body rotation. And so I think that so much of our races and so much of our swims, even in the distance races, are maintained or controlled by our kick. And so I think that's one of the things. I think if there's anything changing massively in distance swimming, I think it is the use of the kick.
Okay. Any more questions, guys?
Sure,
You have
Dennis,
any
I have a
questions?
question.
Okay, go.
Hello, Coach. I want to ask a question about the breathing pattern. How is it different from like the short courses, short distance swimmers?
As far as the kick,
The breathing, sir, the breathing
oh, the
patterns.
breathing. Okay.
Breathing pattern.
Yeah. I am. I'm a person who I want the kids to breathe as much as they can, and so I promote a 2 or 3 3 or every second or third stroke that they want to do. I think one of the interesting things that I learned from one of my athletes is I had Dan Ketchum, who swam with us, later on went on to make an Olympic team. But he breathed every 2, but he would breathe 25 meters, and the long course pool would be 25 meters to the right side, 25 meters to the left side. For him, it was mostly so that he could see the rest of the pool and kind of know where people were in a longer race. But I really liked it because I don't, just theoretically, I don't like the kids just breathing to one side. I think sometimes it creates a gallop. Sometimes it makes throws their stroke off. But I also, a lot of kids aren't able to maintain that breathing every third cycle. So I found asking them to breathe to the right side, but also know how to breathe to the left side and being able to use that. So one of the sets that we do probably on a weekly basis is some version of we're going to go 12 75s in a short course pool, 25 breathing to the right side only, 25 breathing to the left side only, 25 breathing every third. And so I'm a big proponent of kids being able to breathe on either side, but at the same time, I don't necessarily want them to, have to breathe every third or every fifth or anything like that.
If you try to compare the latest on uh the open water, okay, of 10 kilometers, normally they are sprinting from the start and they're sprinting until the end. Okay. Yeah. Imagine that's 10 kilometers. Okay.
Right.
So any comment on that?
Well, I think that in an open water swim, there's a lot going on there. I think that let me backtrack. I think at almost any distance, I think now you can say they're basically maxing out their effort. When I first got into coaching, a lot of times it was like, well, we're going to coast the first 500 and we're going to, then we're going to build up the second 500 and then we're going to do something. It's really not that anymore. I mean, all of our races at all the distance are pretty much, pick your pace and try to hold it for as long as you can. Open water is interesting because you've got that first part at the start where you're in the chute, and there's a certain amount of sprinting and jockeying for position that has to happen. And so, a lot of, and it becomes a strategy. Do I get out in front and get out of the mess that is an open water scrum, and how do I do that? And so, yeah, I agree. I think that the 10 kilometers, and like I referenced earlier, I watched Chip Peterson hold a 6 beat kick for an entire 5K. So, again, I think you are putting on that, putting out that effort from the very beginning, but it's a pace that you can hold, and that goes back to the training side of things. What pace can you hold for a 10K? And you need to replicate that in practice. If I'm going 10K, again, holding 110 pace, again, open water, it's always hard to, know what your exact pace is, but, holding a minute 10 per 100 pace, I need to be able to do that for 2 hours in practice. And, I need to be able to replicate that. If I want to do it for 15 minutes in a race, I need to be able to do it for 40, 45 minutes in practice. And so that goes back to we're just repeating that pace. But open water is always interesting, especially at the 10K level, because there are certain periods where you need to be able to access speed. And that goes back to, again, adding sprinting to your weekly training load, is because you need to be able to access speed, at various times. It may be, are you rounding a buoy? It may be just, you get in a pack and you want to leave the pack. You need to be able to access that and access that kick to make that happen. And so I think that, again, going back to that, being able to have that next level speed is important. And it's probably, like I said, it's probably more important to be able to access it instantaneously during an open water event.
Coach, most of the distance swimmers are dependent on the threshold workouts.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so now for you as a distance swimmer, for example, um, what is the most important workout for a distance swimmer program?
I'll separate that into two things. I think that there's no one workout that is going to make you a great distance swimmer or not a great swimmer. I think it is how those workouts stack upon each other. And so really, I've spent more time and still spend more time looking at the mix of practice sessions and workouts, like how Monday's workout affects Tuesday's workout, how Tuesday's workout affects Wednesday. Can we make some changes in Wednesday to make Thursday better? So there's not one specific, training session that I would say will make or break your program. It really is how each training session adds an element to that. But when it comes to like the skills of the things that the kids need to have, I think that early on in their program, in their age group program, having that capacity, having that threshold, that ability to hold the threshold over time. Again, if you're using kind of some of the traditional systems of where your threshold pace is and things like that, bringing that threshold down, is going to have a long-term effect on your ability to be a swimmer at any point. I think that, those threshold workouts build that base that you have, and you can always add power to that. You can always add speed to that. You can't necessarily go the other way around. You can't develop speed and then just have this base to draw from later on when you're 19, 20, 21. So I think that early development of your threshold pace, that early development of your aerobic capacities is vital to being able to, again, I won't even limit it to being a distance swimmer. I think to being a swimmer at the elite level, I think you need to have that capacity early on in your career.
Any comment with regards to the um enhancement games?
um, I will say I'm not a fan. I mean, just from my perspective, it becomes less about, um, again, it becomes less about your abilities and training and things like that, and more about what enhancements you're actually implementing. So
Mhm.
again, I think it for me, and again, I've been doing this a long time. It just it takes away the aspect that I love about the sport is really, again, from a coaching standpoint, me trying to figure out how to get that extra 2 or 3 tenths of a second,
Yeah.
out of a swimmer, through training and through all the things, the mental aspects and all of that sort of thing. I just think it takes away from, I guess, from what I view myself as a professional, of being able to outsource that to a substance or to something else. So I'm not, I guess I'm not in support of it, but that's for me.
I'd rather go for high altitude than
Absolutely.
doing the enhancement. Yeah, yeah.
Right.
If you're there's a side effect on the enhancement, so your 5 to 10 seconds of cutting the time, you can easily get that or obtain that on a high altitude. Yeah.
Right. Well, and I think that, from a, again, my standpoint, from a coach's standpoint and from an athlete standpoint, my whole goal is, I guess, the fun of it, the challenge of it, the reason I'm involved is chasing that tenth of a second somewhere, and being a problem solver and trying to, solve the problem of where can I find an extra tenth of a second, 2 tenths of a second. And again, I think you lose some of that when you're talking about enhancements.
Ryan.
Yeah, for talent scouting. Yeah. So Sir Chris, what are your checklist for like a swimmer to transition if he or she is ready for to transition for a long distance swimming? Because I have some swimmers here who are like short course swimmers, but yeah, what are the main factors that we need to see if they're ready
Criterias. Oh yeah.
for yeah
For,
for a long distance swimming? Yeah.
yeah, I think that, I hate to simplify it this way. Some of it, a big part of it is a willingness to kind of do what it takes, and I think that there is a different mentality for distance swimmers, that that just needs to happen. The ability to maintain pace. I think probably, if I'm looking for signals of people that can make that transition to a distance program. And again, let me backtrack here real quick. We have all of our kids as a young age are swimming distance events, and um, so we get a pretty good gauge on their abilities to swim distance, because I don't think there's anyone in our program after the age of 12 who doesn't swim the 400 IM, the 400 free, the 800 free, a multitude of times over the course of the season. But that being said, a lot of what I look for is their ability to maintain and control their pace. And so, one of the better distance swimmers we had in our program, he was, we kind of saw that there was something there because we put him in a mile. I think he was 13 at the time, and all of his 50s were within 2 tenths of a second of each other for the entire 1,500 meters. And so, you know, and again, frustratingly enough, probably the last one was probably 2 seconds faster or something like that. But he was, not only very similar, but really just within 2 tenths of a second, just very consistent. And I think that we've tried to replicate that. And I try to notice that side of things even when we're in practice. So again, if we're doing 10 100s on 130, and a swimmer is, just, spot on 101, 101, 101, 101, that kind of gives us an indication that they're able to do that. Whereas someone who may not have that mentality and may not have that sense of self, they may go, 101, 59, 106, they may be all over the map, or they may, 59, 101, 102, 105, 108, and just get slower and slower as it goes on. that's kind of an indication maybe they're not quite ready to put together a traditional distance race.
Thank you, sir.
Mhm.
Any comment on the China 400 IM of 431, 432, and 433? Do you have any comment on that? That's 30 years
No.
old.
I know. Again, I think it's amazing. I would be curious how it was done. I think that unfortunately for the success China's had, they're very they're not very transparent on how they're doing things and what those things are how they're getting done. But again, I'm going to take it at face value that it was an amazing swim to watch. Michael Phelps was able to do a lot of amazing things as a younger athlete. Again, I think because he had that distance base, and again, you can go to Katie Ledecky, you can go to kind of our well-known athletes. They were able to develop that base at a young age, and I think that the Chinese system is able to is able to kind of mandate that probably a little bit more than our system is here in the U.S.
I was shocked to see uh, three 13 years old in just one competition, all in
Right.
China. Okay.
Right.
Well,
and again, and I think that they have always been able to replicate that with numerous athletes, and obviously, I think that, again, it's amazing to watch. I think that again, you go back to does that translate into a better athlete when they get bigger and stronger? And I think typically it does. So. No, I want to say thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity and love talking swimming. So if anybody has any questions that come up at any time, just reach out and I'd be happy to answer.
Sir Chris, thank you so much. Okay.
Thank you.
And we're trying to improve our system. Maybe about 2 weeks or 3 weeks from now, it will be automated on the certificate. Okay.
Awesome.